Steve here.
And Larson.
Yeah, welcome back to our newest Dark Side of the Ring review. This time, the UWF Dark Side of the Ring, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, the Herb Abrams story. This was, of course, about the UWF.
Yes.
Which stood for United Wrestling Federation? Is that what it was?
Universal
Wrestling Federation.
Universal Wrestling Federation, yeah. So apparently this started to crystallize in the mind of Herb Abrams in the late 80s, early 90s. It's interesting to see here the genesis of it and his initial recruitment pitch happened at a wrestling convention, one of the very first ones.
I like that you use the word you crystallize in his mind, because it's the only crystals in his mind. There's a lot of cocaine. This episode, I didn't take a single note, because I think that there's kind of a more interesting conversation to be had about competition for the WWF in general than because this story is a very simple one. It's a guy who loved to party. He loved people. People loved him. That's one thing that I thought that the documentary in general didn't get across until they talked about his death. Mm-hmm. Because I was surprised. I mean, I'm just fast forwarding the end here. He died in spectacularly scandalous fashion in a fit of cocaine seeming rage of some sort. Yeah, with a baseball bat, and then he had a heart attack or whatever.
I mean, he was all like oil, like he was covered in Vaseline or baby oil or something.
Yeah,
like that. And
what struck me was how I got teary-eyed seeing Steve Ray, not to be confused with Booker T's brother, with Steve Ray crying, saying this guy believed in me, and then the other guy, I forget his name, who was his like right-hand man or whatever.
Oh, Lenny, yeah.
He was crying, and I mean, he died like 20 years ago, or 25 years ago now, and they didn't really get to the point during the documentary how much he was loved to generate that reaction in people.
Yeah, they laid out a bunch of reasons why he would not be loved.
Right,
stiffing people on money, putting people in really awkward and uncomfortable situations, being naked constantly. Things that might, to certain people, rub them the wrong way. And that was kind of established. So at the end of the episode, when you see these really intense, genuine emotional reactions, just talking about his death 25 plus years ago, they didn't exactly lay the groundwork. I mean, like, I know that guy Lenny talked about how they were best friends for years and years and years and years, even before I believe Herb Abrams started the UWF. Mm-hmm. So that's like the only inclination we get that on a personal social level that any of these people were really close.
Yeah,
because given the circumstances of basically everything about UWF, it's shocking that as many people stuck around as long as what they did.
Yeah. When he said they were still in the office in like 96, I was like, how was that possible?
There's got to be some intense personal connections made for people to stick through it that long. First show they have the first pay-per-view they have in Florida in this Civic Center, and a couple hundred people show up, and it would seem pretty obvious at that point, this ain't going anywhere. Yeah, right. Yeah. This thing's DOA, Yeah. And then, stick it out and come back around a year later, do the show in Vegas, and the same thing happens, which is, they made it seem the documentary that was the de facto end of the promotion. Mm-hmm. But that being said, it still seems like through all his hijinks, through all the crazy stuff he did, through all the instances of him stiffing people money, people still just like the guy.
Yeah. And that did seem to be the missing piece of the puzzle, is that you have to infer all this stuff, which is not really probably the approach you want to get from a documentary, because there's so much cocaine and there's so many hooker stories and there's so many stories about him stiffing people on their pay, which is a much bigger issue. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pictures of him with a lot of smiling people. And he comes across as a guy that has an infectious personality, and I think that's what it is. But they never really gave us any stories about how that sort of was his selling point, because he had to have some sort of selling point beyond just, hey, I've got a lot of money and I'm making a go of this thing. You know, there was, you know, him telling Steve Ray, hey, I'm going to make you a star. We're going to make a lot of money together. What also kind of not really surprises me, I guess, but especially because it was like back in the late 80s, early 90s, was just how, you know, somebody comes up to you and they have a lot of money. Hey, I'm going to make you a star. Just how many people like sort of buy in, you know? It's like, oh, you got money. It took that guy talking to Bruno, the convention organizer, talking to Bruno. To
make sure that he was legit. Yeah, but I mean, this his ability to get, you know, Dr. Death, to get Paul Orndorff,
Andre.
To get Andre even just for a appearance. Yeah. I mean, you know, I to get Bruno involved. His ability to talk to these people and convince them that this isn't some fly-by-night thing. He's serious about this and he's invested in it. Yeah, it's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. There's a lot of comical stories. I mean, the final bit where they talked about his death, and it's this tragic thing, but obviously it's steeped in just in dark humor because nobody even really knows exactly how he died. They just sort of surmise he was either in the back of a cop car, it was either inside jail, it was either, you know, on the spot when the cops were trying to arrest him. It was one of those things. Regardless, he was hepped up on cocaine and his heart probably exploded. That's probably what happened here. But, you know, all the silly reenactment out of focus stuff, and they still like pixelate out his junk, his hog. I know. And they go through every scenario that people are thinking of, and I'm like, this is the funniest reenactment of a death I've ever seen in my life, and it's so darkly comical, but it's very fitting for him because obviously that's the life he led.
As is B. Brian Blair's statement that he died doing the two things he loved: cocaine and hookers.
Yeah, yeah, the baseball bat, evidently. So the one of the more interesting stories. So I was watching. Lacey was sitting next to me. We were watching this, and she said. So I'll pose this question to you. Why has Vince McMahon been able to stay in business at the top as long as he has? Why is it there's never been, I mean, yes, there was WCW, but really they were a competitor truly for 83 weeks.
Yeah.
Why is it Vince McMahon has stayed at the top? Now I have my answer. I want to hear yours.
Ruthless aggression. That's what it is. It's ruthless aggression. Sure, he has money, but he's not afraid to go for the kill.
See, I actually put it not on him. I put it on lack of focused competition. That's when the few times when somebody's been able to focus, when Bischoff was able to focus and he had a plan and the money, and then, but it was obvious that plan was very short term, and that plan was had the ingredients to fall apart after 83 weeks, which is what happened. And now we actually have AEW, so it is going to be very interesting in 10 years to see where that lands.
Yeah,
but you know, she's like, why has he been able to stay at the top? And I'm looking at UWF. It's because nobody who has had the money to threaten Vince McMahon or to start up something of their own to try to compete with him, nobody's had the singular vision, or they just haven't had the money to compete, like in the case of the Dino Bravo one, where, you know, they were local and they never had the means to be more than local.
Yeah, and I think that was the case in the territory days kind of across the board is, they were holding things down in their territory, but when Vince comes in and starts swooping your stars, and you're like, the same thing happened to AWA. You know, they were trying to compete on a more national level. They moved their TV tapings from I think Minneapolis to Vegas in their waning days, and even with they deal with ESPN, they couldn't do it. And they didn't have star power. There
was even, I mean, look, and going back to what you said, ruthless aggression, that's obviously like, you know, Vince McMahon, he was no pushover. It's not like anybody could have come and steer. As soon as Andre showed up, what did he do? He busted out his checkbook and he brought back Andre. So, yes, there's totally, you know, you do lay probably most of it at Vince McMahon and his ruthless aggression and how he responds when his back is up against the wall. We've seen Vince McMahon can respond. But he's also been helped, I think, by the fact that whenever there's been competition, they shoot themselves in the foot. I'm on page 400 something of this Nitro book, and I'm in the thick of the Russo days. I'm reading up on Bash of the Beach right now.
Oof.
And it's like there could have been any number of ways WCW could have held it together. And in the end, who knows if, at the end of the day when the AOL thing went through, the bottom line is people there didn't like it. But, it also didn't help that they had lost, or on the books anyways. Bischoff says because of the way they structured their budget within Turner, he was like, I don't really think we lost $61 million in 1999. But yeah, they were running at a deficit of $61 million in their last year, or 2000. I think it was 99. He says we weren't listed as a line item. We were listed as other. And so there was a lot of stuff that was going into that other, and a lot of it probably didn't have anything to do with WCW. That's Bischoff's take on it.
Yeah.
And so, you read about this stuff with Russo, and it's like, God, that dude could not help but just shoot himself in the foot over and over and over again. And again, they had the money, they had the resources, the lack of a focused plan killed WCW. In the end, that's what it was. It's like they offered Hogan that ridiculous deal, shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been interesting to if Herb Abrams hadn't approached Vince about promoting on the West Coast, or if he hadn't had the type of reaction that he did, where he's got his own upstart promotion, run a handful of shows, maybe go to Vince and say, hey, let us handle your business on the West Coast. Of course, Vince, he's going to say no to that. Yeah, he's already well established on the West Coast. He's not going to delegate any of his booking opportunities there to somebody else.
Yeah.
But if Herb Abrams had just said, all right, well, let's just build our own thing here on the West Coast, make this as solid as possible and go from there, rather than going for the kill immediately, maybe things would have been different to build things up in a more organic fashion.
Yeah.
I do want to know where in Reseda they were shooting, though, because they did mention it was in Reseda somewhere.
I know, yeah. Our kind of tangential old stomping grounds. Crap, I had a point. One thing I was going to mention with regards to WCW, because there was also, if you think about it, TNA. Look at all the talent TNA had, man. Yeah. And they were like on the verge, and then what did they do? They brought in Hogan. They brought in Russo. They brought in Bischoff. They shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, they thought bringing in those guys would push them to the next level. Instead, it set them back.
Yep, exactly. And that was only one of many problems there. But again, lack of a focused vision, a long-term vision.
I think Jeff Jarrett seemingly had a vision for it in the early days. It was money issues he ran into.
Yeah.
And that's when he had to bring in Dixie and stuff, and that's one thing. The vision aspect probably got a bit muddled.
Yeah, exactly. So that really was kind of an interesting thought watching this UWF, because seemingly the wrestlers, wanted an additional place to work. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want 2, 3, 4 companies all battling over talent? Because the only person the talent's going to make out like gangbusters in that situation.
You got that right.
So that was one of the more interesting sort of concepts looking at the UWF documentary. But my God, it was just there's just a lot of cocaine in this episode.
Yeah, a lot of cocaine, a lot of sex.
Pretty much.
A lot.
No, I was thinking about WCW. I was reading something the other day. Raven had an interview about his career in general, and there's been sound bites coming out of it. Wrestle Talk had some stuff, but and I think one of the Wrestle Talk pieces was had to do with
when Vince brought him back.
No. That was that one. I think we had both heard that.
Yeah, we'd heard that before.
But and I know we had heard this before, but it sort of hammered it home. You and I really started getting back into it in 96, 97. When Revenge, the video game, came out, and Raven was on the cover. Being relatively new to it, but still having watched it for probably a year or so, I guess at that point, I didn't bat an eye at Raven being on the cover. I thought Raven was like a big deal. He had his own flock. They gave him lots of time, lots of promos.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that there was a question that he was on there with Hogan and who's it? Hogan, Nash, DDP maybe. with
Yeah.
like the main event scene. But apparently the developer, whoever the marketing guy was, really liked Raven, so they put him on there. But to me, I was always just like, yeah, Raven's on there because Raven's
he
hot
belongs,
shit.
man. Yeah, he was incredible.
Even Flow DDT, man.
Hell yeah, man.
So like when you look back on that stuff and you're like, oh my God. And we all know this. The sheer level of mid-card talent that just stayed in the mid-card is obscene.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. The number of eventual main eventers that were mid-card talents in WCW is insane.
They had Jericho, Guerrero, and Benoit all just in the cruiserweight division.
And Mysterio.
That's insane. That's crazy. That is crazy. Could you imagine? Because they were talking about Bash at the Beach and how I think it was Russo or Bischoff talked about how I think it was Russo because he wanted to know who the wrestlers thought. This is according to Russo, so who knows? He wanted to know from the wrestlers who the locker room thought should be the world champion, and every one of them pointed at Booker T. They all pointed at Booker T, and so Russo was like, "Okay, that's the guy then." And that's when we saw Booker T, sort of emerge. But it's like, yeah, you got Booker T there. It's like you have all this talent.
Yeah.
And then look at what happened because there was a lack of a focused division there.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Hogan's contract just killing everything.
The albatross, yeah.
It was like that Bash of the Beach thing. It was just endless negotiations with him and his lawyers over the finish to the match. That's obscene.
Yeah, that's obnoxious.
Crazy. But
that's
obnoxious. The UWF, it was interesting stuff. But like, you never get the idea or the impression that like they were ever going to be a real threat to anything.
No, because they might have had a decent roster, but in terms of the presentation of their television show, like I understand, like on Raw, WWF had like the Ico Pro banners, like the vinyl banners and stuff, but at least they looked like well done.
Yeah.
Just I think based on the design of the UWF logo and the nature of the banners they had made, it didn't look at that same level.
Yeah, my favorite bit was when Foley said, "Yeah, I went to Herb's office." And he said, "Hey, this is going to blow people's minds." And he was like, "Oh, cool. There's some like wrestling talent that he got."
Yeah.
And he busts out some bright yellow cowboy boots with UWF like branded into them. And he was like, he actually thought that people were going to pop. They were going to go crazy for his cowboy boots.
For his yellow boots. Yeah, it was for the Vegas show. Yeah. It was funny seeing Foley drop a promo in like 1990.
Yeah, I know.
That one little clip of a promo.
Yeah. And I like how he was like, I saw those empty seats and all I thought was that's more places to do stuff.
Yeah.
And he got to fight Snuka. So like people have like fond memories of it, But given within the context of like Foley obviously has been everywhere. This is probably just a blip on the radar for him, but it's such a big, and the kicker at the end when they said, where would Herb Abrams be today? Or what would he be doing today? And Foley gets his big grin on his face and says, time. There's no way he wouldn't be in jail if he was still alive today. And hurting nobody but himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it was a fascinating look into a guy who had a lot of passion for cocaine and wrestling and hookers and people, seemingly.
I wonder how commonplace stories like that were in the late 80s, early 90s when, there was still a great deal of excess where people had a lot of money and were pursuing things and were ultimately undone by their own excess,
Probably endless. One of the other funny one of the funny things that I thought that it struck me as funny was, sorry, what was the name of the heavy dude who was the manager?
Oh shoot!
And he reenacted the
when he checked into his suite in Beverly Hills, and Herb comes in with a couple of.
Hold on, I'll have it right here.
I'm trying to remember. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, here we go. Marty Esberg.
Yeah,
I think that was him.
Yeah.
And it even says it here. So I'm looking at 411mania.com. They always have like extensive recaps here. So I just go to that instead of taking my own notes. My favorite little comment here. It was so he said he was in. So Marty is a dude from the Carolinas. He's South Carolina.
South Carolina. Yeah.
And he said, as he was coming up, he heard about a mark out of California that was throwing him out around money with the UWF. It always amuses me when these wrestlers refer to fans with money with a vision as marks and then he goes out there and then he ends up being a mark for Hollywood because he's like, and then there's some escorts, some call girls, some hookers, but they weren't these snaggletooth call girls. We're talking about Hollywood honeys. And I'm like, who's the mark now? All this guy has to do, and here's the funny thing, like the Hollywood honeys, they probably really weren't all that special either.
Well, the funny thing about all that too is that once Herb brings out the cocaine, and the dude's like, "All right, SWAT team's coming. I want nothing to do with this."
Like, this guy has seen a lot of movies and a lot of episodes of Miami Vice at this point to know that if there's cocaine, like the cops immediately know, and they're
it's got to be a sting operation at that point, you know?
Exactly. So like they just turn into these like innocent little boys who are like, "Oh, we got to get out of here. We're going to be in trouble." When it was like, probably just another day for Herb Abrams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that Herb really wanted to do away with Vince McMahon. He wanted to crush Vince McMahon. Like, obviously, he came nowhere near that.
No.
And, like, to see his face during the pay-per-view, how dejected he was over, like, the turnout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was just sad, but, man, it was pretty comical, too.
I think the next one is on the Road Warriors, I believe.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
Yeah,
that should
I wonder
be pretty
what
decent.
angle they're going to take with that one. So
yeah, that should be good. So, anyways, join us for that, and then of course, when are we putting this one up? Tomorrow, Saturday?
Yeah, I'm gonna put up some point Saturday. So Sundays is all about Money in the Bank.
Free. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
So tomorrow, check out. We're gonna be doing our live reactions at Money in the Bank. Join us then. Big Red's gonna be on the line, man. Maybe you'll bring him home. Would you at least put him in the background of your shot?
I'd have to get approval for that. Since this is my bedroom. This isn't my space. This is shared space.
All right.
The bed is to my left over here.
Well,
just off frame.
Maybe, listen, I'll talk to my wife. She'll talk to your wife. We'll get it sorted out, man. We'll get it sorted
Whenever
out.
you say that's oh gosh, it's so irritating.
I know.
It's the worst. It's really the worst.
Anyways, we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.